Let's ask former Pentagon UFO investigator and whistleblower Lou Elizondo and News Nation special correspondent and investigative journalist Ross Coulthart. Lou, do I have it wrong? Or is Grusch saying it's not just about technology? It's about organic, extraterrestrial beings that the U.S. government is aware of?
Yeah, Chris, thanks for having me. I think what you are witnessing before our very eyes is the disintegration of perhaps the greatest cover-up in American history. He has testified before, for the record, David Grusch, about the existence of non-human intelligence. I had the honor and privilege to work and serve with David Grusch when we were both working at U.S. Space Force. And I can tell you what he had access to was very legitimate. But this is a big national, I think, a national conversation that's now just finally, I think, resonating with the American people, and they're waking up to the fact that, hey, you know what? The government's been lying to us.
Ross, Tim Burchett comes up and says what I always say. Don't hit me with a tinfoil hat. I'm not talking about Martians. I want to know what they're doing with our money and our thing. He says that. This guy comes up right after him and says, yeah, it is about little green men. They do have information about it. That's it. That is the biggest piece of information, if it's true, that I have ever heard in my entire life.
Well, g'day, Chris. I can tell you, having just come from a viewing of Steven Spielberg's fictional telling of Disclosure Day, it's quite something to see Dave Grusch talking about biologics, about beings, about different types of sentient, advanced, intelligent beings on the steps of the Capitol. And you're right, this is the next stage, the fact that we do know that the United States government is working with retrieved technology and beings. They do have retrieved biologics. That's from Dave Grusch on the record, under oath, before Congress. And he went so much further today. The thing that most worried me, and I'm sure Lou would agree, is the big revelation from Dave today was about foreign adversary intelligence. The fact that it's probably the Chinese, I suspect, are spying on our retrieval and reverse engineering programs. And Dave said he was apprised of signals intelligence information about foreign adversary UAP crash retrieval, exploitation and study efforts. So we're in a weird position where the Chinese or the Russians probably know more than the American public and most of the military and intelligence community and the president then frankly should be the case. It's appalling.
I totally get it, and I agree with you. But again, who cares? I had to put this at the end of the show, Lou, because I don't know how to deal with this. Like, you know, if it's not true, then fine. I'm fine to have egg on my face that I reported it at all and that I gave it a platform, because it's that important. And I'm looking forward to how they say it's not true. But, Lou, if it is true, okay, I don't care that the Chinese are spying on us. That's what they do. We spy on them. We all do terrible things, and there's lots of technology. If there is life off of this planet, that is the biggest headline of our lifetime. And that phrase that he just used, plasmoid, whatever, what is he talking about, Lou?
Yeah, he's referring to what some have speculated regarding orbs that have been viewed really since the 1940s during the Foo Fighter incidents, and then later over New Mexico skies, over controlled military airspace. And it seems that, at least in some cases, some of these orbs seem to have some sort of intelligence connected with them. And so rather than just being like, let's say, a probe or a drone, these things have been reported to almost behave and react in some cases as if there was ascribed to it some sort of I hate to say it, but life form. I got you. I was more nuts and bolts guy when I was in the program. My focus was more on actual the physical craft. Yeah. But it has been speculated based upon observations that some of these
let's all agree on this. I got to go to break. Mr. President, you better clear this up.
Avi Loeb, astrophysicist and Harvard professor and one of the leading voices in this world on a scientific search for extraterrestrial life, and Jordan Flowers, the executive director of the Disclosure Foundation, an organization advocating for greater government transparency on UAPs. Avi, I'll start with you. You believe Grusch? Because my understanding is he doesn't have like firsthand knowledge of this, like he didn't see it himself?
Well, thanks for having us. I haven't seen the evidence. It's all about the evidence. And it's possible that there is a retrieval and reverse engineering program within government of materials from crash sites from adversarial nations. That's very reasonable. We have to see the proof. And, frankly, it would surprise me if there are biological creatures that were retrieved, because that kind of information has nothing to do with national security and should have been shared with scientists long ago if there was such evidence.
I think you can make a national security argument. If there's extraterrestrials, it might implicate national security. But Jordan, I'll go to you. Representative Tim Burchett says if the public saw what he's seen, they'd be up at night. That was a quote, up at night. Nothing in the files reaches that level, right? Unless you think differently. Are we waiting for the later files? Is it going to be withheld? What do you think?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on, Jesse. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think there will be more files, and I think there will be more interesting things that come out. That's what our contacts in Congress have been saying. I was fortunate enough to be standing right behind Representative Burchett at the press conference today, and that is the information we have. But again, with no context provided with these information releases and with no analysis, it's really difficult to distill what is happening here. Certainly, there must be intelligence reports that go along with these videos and these papers to help understand what it is we're actually dealing with.
Avi, do you think they know what it is? In other words, do you think that the government has proof this is clear alien spacecraft or life, or it's just misidentified natural Earth phenomena, advanced technology? Do you think they have a conclusion?
Well, since I'm a scientist, I follow the evidence. We haven't seen it yet. And based on what we know, it may well be that the intelligence agencies and the Pentagon are unable to identify craft from adversarial nations. Now, that's a very serious national security issue because they're admitting that they're not doing their job. And that means that it deserves a lot of attention. We need better data. We need to build better sensors. So there should be a program to figure out what these objects are. And, if at the end of the day, 1 out of 1 million objects turns out to be non-human made, that would be the biggest discovery ever made by humanity.
Jordan, do you think there's things they shouldn't tell us? Do you think there's things that shouldn't be released? Because I don't know. The skeptic in me says, are they really going to release everything they have?
I think the nuclear analogy is really appropriate here. We know that there are atoms. We know that we have nuclear energy, and we know we have nuclear weapons. The reality of atoms is not hidden from us. I think that's really appropriate here. There should be, if there's things about the fundamental nature of reality, or that we are not alone, that is information that could be released. And we may be able to develop technology based on this, but certainly if there are things that we need to protect for national security purposes or weaponization, that should not be released. So I think the nuclear analogy is really appropriate here.
Avi, I don't know if there's anything that's actually going to calm the conversation, right? Because it feels like to me the government's in a no-win situation here. No matter what they release, the UFO enthusiasts, those who have theories, they're going to say, is that it? There's got to be more. Like, it doesn't, I don't think there's a win-win situation here, Avi.
Well, let's keep our eyes on the ball. I think it's not, the goal is not to please the public.
That's true.
The goal is to figure out whether there are holes in the defense of the United States. That's, if you are down to earth, that's really the concern. However, in the process of figuring things out, there is a chance that there is some data that indicates that we're not alone, and that would be amazing. But I think everyone should focus on the national security issue at first, because it's a very serious matter.
Yeah, 100%.
Richard McCormick, since this is a Republican, at least Burchett is talking about this, what is he saying exactly is being covered up?
Well, now realize he's a good friend of mine, but also we can be a little bit dramatic. We know there's been a lot of UFOs out there unidentified. That's what makes them unidentified. We don't know what they are. I'm a Marine Corps pilot for 16 years. I've known pilots who've seen things, but they couldn't explain it. That doesn't mean there's not an explanation. It doesn't mean that there's not aliens. But I don't believe there's a huge cover-up. I don't believe, just like with the JFK shootings when we released a bunch of stuff and there was no there. I'm just looking forward to find out as much as possible, but I don't think anybody's really trying to cover this up. I'm looking forward to
hearing though this thing about we want to find out as much as possible. Yes. Sometimes at some point we have found out everything there is. We're not going to all be allowed into Area 51 for obvious reasons. But Congressman Subramaniam, I'm always taken during this conversation by the question of where is the there? Our government cannot count votes in California in 2 weeks, and we're expected to believe that for 80 years, multiple generations, they have covered up what would be the greatest secret in human history? I just don't think the government's that good.
I don't know if the government's that good either. I'll say that there is a lot of information that these agencies have kept that a lot of people want to see. They want to see exactly what's there, and they want that form of transparency. And I say, let's give it to the people and let them make their own decision. I've seen some of it. I'll agree with Congressman McCormick that there's definitely some unexplainable stuff, but that doesn't mean there isn't an explanation, or that doesn't mean the explanation that it's little green men in a spaceship. So, I say release all the stuff and let people make their own decisions.
Okay, but Rich McCormick, there's two answers to that. One is there's things we can't release because maybe it's U.S. technology or maybe it's technology from other countries that we're surveilling. It hurts national security to release, which of course then everyone says you're covering everything up. Are we to believe that any secret the public has a right to demand under the name of transparency?
That's a really good point, actually. As a military guy, I will say there are technologies we're probably protecting that we have that maybe could explain some of these unidentified objects, as well as technologies of foreign countries and adversaries that we want to protect. I think the more concerning thing is, where are the scientists going? We do know that several leading scientists have disappeared. That's the one that I'm more curious about, because that's a factual debate.
Well, that is. I want to play for you real quickly David Grusch, who's been one of the big whistleblowers in this. Take a listen.
I certainly don't have the compendium. It's a continuum from corporeal bipedal type life to, what I would consider like sentient plasmoid life. But there are several that the U.S. government is aware of.
Do either of you have any idea what he is talking about?
Yeah, I've gotten that briefing from him directly, and basically what he's saying is there's different types of aliens that have been identified and we've made contact with. I'm a little skeptical. I think if you're going to make that kind of claim, you need some really hard proof, and I haven't seen any hard proof yet. So, but that's certainly what he's saying.
No, I'm extremely skeptical.
Rich McCormick, we all are, trust me. What I'm skeptical about, though, is that this is all happening at exactly the same time there is this big movie from Steven Spielberg. I don't believe in coincidences in Washington.
No, I don't either, and I think this does coincide with a lot of drama, a lot of publicity. People love to have their claim to fame. But quite frankly, once again, even in the military, you've seen how people don't even keep secrets in top secret missions. We're making movies, and a year later, on things that we know we're not supposed to be talking about. I just don't see how they keep this a secret.
Yeah, well, maybe that's the point, that there isn't one, except in the movies, which Spielberg has always been able to bring to life. Gentlemen, thank you both. Reality check from both of you, Subramaniam, Rich McCormick. One thing for tomorrow when we come back.
All right, my next guests may have opinions on that. They both have testified before Congress about seeing evidence of UFOs while on active duty in the Navy. Now private citizens, they are both advocates for greater transparency. Ryan Graves is a former Navy fighter pilot and founder of Americans for Safe Aerospace. And retired Admiral Tim Gallaudet is an oceanographer who served as head of the NOAA. He's the author of the upcoming book, Holding Fast in Heavy Seas. It is great to have you both here. Admiral, you were standing right behind David Grusch and Congressman Burleson as they were talking. The Congressman, Burleson, said that you and David Grusch are, quote, the most important people in this story because they endured an avalanche of stress, all because they believe the information belongs to you, the American. I have to think that felt good to get that sort of recognition that you had been pushing for so long for transparency.
Well, hi, Elizabeth. It's great to be on your show again. And I try not to make this about me, to be honest with you. And Ryan will say the same thing. This is really about the truth, getting the truth to the American people. So I was glad to see a bipartisan push today. That was quite remarkable to see a Democratic congressman and Eric Burleson commend President Trump for his move to transparency. So I think this is really remarkable, and I was glad to be a part of the event.
Right. I was really struck by the congressman saying, hang on, SEAL Team 6 assassinated Osama bin Laden with a Navy, some sort of super sophisticated Navy helicopter we never approved of and had no knowledge of, and that trillions of dollars in the Pentagon has sort of disappeared into thin air.
Yeah, well, that was an important...
Wait, Ryan, let Ryan do that, and then you can weigh in, Admiral.
Yes, I was just going to say, certainly, you know, there's programs that are protected within Area 51, of course, and other test and evaluation areas. But ultimately, what the congressman is talking about are programs that are spending trillions of dollars, perhaps, that are completely unaccounted for across congressional budgeting, right? Mm-hmm. So for a democracy, a constitutional democracy, to be able to function, the voters need to be informed about the decisions that the government is making. If they have to decide between one congressman or one president versus another candidate, how can they do so if they're not even discussing the issues that are relevant in this case?
But Admiral, how is it possible that the Navy's actually using technology that Congress hasn't approved of or isn't aware of?
Well, right, that's the issue, and that's what we came forward today to speak about, is that this should not be any programs the Pentagon's conducting that are not subject to congressional oversight. And as Ryan mentioned brilliantly, this is what our Constitution mandates. So this is unacceptable, and that's what we all were there to call for today.
Well, Admiral, what did you make of what David Grusch said about the government being aware that there were several kinds of extraterrestrial life, including bipedal life, sentient plasmoid life? What do those terms even mean?
Well, Elizabeth, I don't have firsthand knowledge of the different types of non-human intelligences that the government is aware of. And actually, there are even books that have been published by former Defense Intelligence Agency officials about the investigations documenting these types of NA. I don't have firsthand knowledge of them, but there are declassified reports and books that document this. So the government is aware, and that's on the record.
Ryan, Grusch also mentioned that during his time as an intelligence officer that he learned that the U.S. had a UFO crash retrieval program, but also that our adversaries had these same crash retrieval programs, most notably Russia and China. This is a national security issue. Our enemies, geopolitically, may be reverse engineering UFO wreckage to come up with new technology that might be difficult for us to combat.
Absolutely, and perhaps not just our adversaries, but our allies as well. There's a lot of documentation from the Soviet Union and Russia, and interest shown in China on these topics as well. And ultimately, if this is a technology tree that we are withholding from our defense base, and our adversary is willing to utilize that technology against us, then our defenses against those technologies will be inadequate. And that's one of the gaps that is posed here for national security that we need to address. Never mind the fact that our adversaries, often such as China, have the ability to put a large amount of resources and people into specific problems where the compartmentalized nature of how we operate at a very high classification level prevents mass diffusion of that information. Is what allows us to have an innovative ecosystem with all the different brains in the United States that we can bring to bear on different problems. That's not what we're doing right now, and we run the vulnerability of falling behind countries that are willing to invest more into this.
And why is it important? They called for whistleblowers to get immunity, to be able to speak freely, in essence. A lot of people have signed non-disclosure agreements. David Grusch said he was forced to sign one of those, and that there's a much more he can speak about, but or would love to speak about, but cannot because of these non-disclosure agreements, these NDAs. They are calling for all whistleblowers to have these NDAs lifted. First of all, Ryan, you first, and then the Admiral. What are the chances those will be lifted? That's a really tough ask, but the pressure does seem to be building.
It does seem to be building. You know, right now, those servants in the executive branch that have signed those NDAs are doing the lawful thing and adhering to the oath that they swore to protect that information. What this really is a battle between Congress to be able to lift those non-disclosure agreements or other restrictions that they might have, and that needs to come from the top of the executive branch, and that's exactly what
meaning the president.
Group of Fine Americans was calling for today.
Meaning the president.
Exactly.
Admiral, I mean, these NDAs, you guys, Congress can call on all these people, and they will get there and say under oath, I can't tell you because I've signed an NDA.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough hill to climb, Elizabeth, because if they just do it for UAP, that opens the door for a number of other topics, which are absolutely critical to have NDAs in place for national security. So, but I think the members of Congress that called for that are doing the right thing, because as David Grusch mentioned during the event, that he has been investigated for potentially violating, or allegedly, the Espionage Act, and that's what's putting the brakes on more UAP disclosure.
Sure, people are seeing he's getting harassed. He's been potentially prosecuted. I'm not going to speak up.
Mr. President, I'm asking you directly. Waive the non-disclosure agreements that still bind these patriots.
Pleaded the president directly, and we spoke with him directly. Congressman Eric Burleson, moments ago. He's on the forefront on the transparency push. Congressman Burleson, thanks for being back with us tonight. We appreciate it, sir. So let's start here. Who has these NDAs that you talk about, and why do they need to go?
Yeah, we've got a lot of people that have served our country. They've signed these non-disclosure agreements, meaning that they can't talk about subjects, and that's mostly a good thing. But when it comes to the topic of UFOs, UAPs, I think this is a topic that one has to question whether or not, you know, the intelligence or any kind of intelligence about intelligent life outside of this planet should be kept a secret. And so I think that the president has done an amazing job, and his administration is doing great work in releasing these files. But I think if they're going to get the answers that they're looking for, they're going to have to have people come forward. And a lot of these people have signed non-disclosure agreements.
Who are they? Who are they? Not with names, but sort of what kind of folks?
Yeah, so it's people, whether they worked in the CIA, worked for the Department of War, under military intelligence, from all facets of intelligence. Anytime someone is briefed in on a topic that is of any kind of security level, they've signed a non-disclosure agreement.
Huh. You were there on the steps with your colleagues who have been sort of at the front line of this. And one of the things that got my attention was Congressman Jared Moskowitz, a Democrat from Florida, other side of the aisle politically, but fighting for all this alongside you. Here's what he said, and then we'll pick it up on the other side.
We know about these advanced technology programs. We know they come out of Area 51. They did when we went to kill Osama bin Laden with an advanced technology helicopter that Congress never funded. There's trillions of dollars missing at the Pentagon. Where does that money go?
That caught my attention, Congressman, and I know that Republicans have often talked about waste, fraud, and abuse, right? Especially, or even within the Pentagon. How do you sort of square, okay, maybe we're sort of mismanaging some money with the possibility that it's being used for UFOs or UAPs? Do you believe that that's where some of the money is going?
Yeah, I absolutely do. In fact, I just left a hearing. It's still going. It's the DOJ Subcommittee of Oversight, chaired by Representative Tim Burchett. And we had people from the Office of Inspector General. We were discussing the fact that the Department of War hasn't passed an audit ever, and they don't plan to until at least the year 2028, which is just totally unacceptable. We discussed the fact that there's times where they spent $1,500 on a coffee cup And we've all heard about the expensive hammers and toilet seats that they buy. So where is that money actually going? And I think that that's what we are getting to the bottom of, is how do we really change the way we audit the Department of War and their expenditures to make sure that what they're purchasing is actually on the up and up.
I hear you. Let me leave you with this. The next release from the Department of War and the files, potentially here in the coming days. If there is a next release, what do you expect from it?
What I'm hoping that we see in the next release is more than blurry photos and videos from drones. I'm hoping that we get some archived information, some historical record documents. Particularly, what I've noticed is that the CIA is noticeably absent, the amount of material that is coming out of the CIA. So I would hope that we're seeing some action there, and also from the FBI. And I know that the FBI does have in its possession videos of some of these fiery glowing orbs that have been accounted for in those records. But I think the biggest smoking gun that has been released so far are the transcripts of the people that are U.S. persons, the senior intelligence officials that encountered glowing objects, glowing orbs. And I've seen the videos that back that up.
Is it your belief then that the CIA is hiding something, or are you not willing to go there yet?
I'm not willing to go there, but I just think it's noticeable that of all the files that have been released, the Department of War has been aggressive in releasing their documents and their images and videos, but we're not getting that from the CIA yet. Hopefully, they will, they'll start performing better.
Congressman Eric Burleson, we'll talk to you again soon, as you know. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Good afternoon. I'm here today because my leadership on the disclosure issue is part of my continued service to the nation. I took an oath as an Air Force officer swearing allegiance to the principles and the framework of the U.S. Constitution. I took that oath seriously then, and I take that oath seriously now. And if this is one of my final duties of public service, I want it to be this: helping Congress and the President restore lawful accountability over activities and spending that should have never been placed beyond constitutional oversight, and to be transparent with the American people. There are a myriad of issues across multiple cultural, religious, and institutional spectrums. The topics here that we're discussing today go beyond life in the universe. There are serious homeland security and airspace safety issues. There are relevant counterintelligence and technology protection issues that must be taken into consideration. For decades, unknown objects have freely operated in restricted airspace in large metropolitan areas and critical infrastructure, and the agencies responsible for securing the homeland cannot adequately defend against it. This is a serious national security issue. In my official duties, I was exposed to human and signals intelligence information concerning foreign adversary, UAP crash retrieval, exploitation and study efforts, adversary views on U.S. legacy program reverse engineering efforts, and U.S.-held audiovisual information related to crash retrieval matters, such as the recovered vehicles and the associated biological material. One must always be concerned about adversarial disinformation when you're getting foreign intelligence, but I was able to cross-verify this information internally to back up the foreign government assertions. Many of the president's team has been kept in the dark by high-ego, politically appointed actors, both because of incompetence and malicious intent has subverted the president's order on this issue. Furthermore, some of this foreign intelligence has not been provided to Congress despite lawful requests to the Defense Intelligence Agency last summer, and also having formally been published across the IC and analyzed by such analytical centers such as NASIC. These records belong under congressional oversight, and I believe DIA should stop obstructing Chairwoman Luna's task force and provide those documents to Congress and enter it through mandatory declassification review so the American public can see some of the foreign intelligence I had access to. Secrecy around this issue did not appear overnight. Subsequent executive orders, Secretary of Defense memorandums, compartmented security, basically nullified Congress's role with the judicial branch with oversight of this issue. Remember, classification exists to protect the nation. Executive Order 13526 discusses what can and cannot be classified. Embarrassment, hiding funds, criminal activity, and the basic information about scientific information in the universe is unlawful for it to be classified. And this is why whistleblower protections matter. Through my federal litigation ongoing with the Department of War, I learned that the Air Force worked with an external agency to seek an investigation of me for alleged unauthorized disclosures punishable under the Espionage Act after I testified in front of Congress in 2023, discussing the results of my congressionally directed investigation in the support of the first Trump administration. This should concern every member of Congress, regardless of party. To this day, I'm still fighting years of record withholding, administrative obstruction, and a prolonged effort to get a medical military retirement that I still am not in a retired status. This is also a real fraud, waste, and abuse issue. President Vance's task force is sharply focused on the issue of misuse of funds. The same accountability problem applies here. And during my investigation, I found slush funds to the tune of billions of dollars per annum for these activities. We cannot have one standard for the American people and another standard for the deep state that hide behind the veil of secrecy. President Trump has the authority to create an enduring legacy of government transparency, accountability consistent with national security protections. Disclosure should not depend on leaks. It should not depend on the public taking my word for it or anyone else's. American people deserve more than vague denials and selective releases of prior administrations, to include through troubled organizations such as ARROW. I applaud the president's efforts and his promise to show true American leadership on this issue of massive worldwide interest, over 1 billion views on the File Drop website. So the time has come to stop asking the public to trust secret conclusions. Instead, provide an honest accounting of what it knows, what it's done, and what has been withheld.
This now, Democratic Virginia Congressman, member of the House Oversight Committee, Suha Subramaniam, Republican Georgia Congressman and member of the House Oversight Committee, Richard McCormick. Richard McCormick, since this is a Republican, at least Burchett is talking about this, what is he saying exactly is being covered up?
Well, now realize he's a good friend of mine, but also we can be a little bit dramatic. We know there's been a lot of UFOs out there, unidentified. That's what makes them unidentified. We don't know what they are. I'm a Marine Corps pilot for 16 years. I've known pilots who've seen things, but they couldn't explain it. That doesn't mean there's not an explanation. It doesn't mean that there's not aliens. But I don't believe there's a huge cover-up. I don't believe, just like with the JFK shootings when we released a bunch of stuff and there was no there. I'm just looking forward to find out as much as possible, but I don't think anybody's really trying to cover this up. I'm looking forward to
hearing this thing about we want to find out as much as possible. Yes. Sometimes at some point we have found out everything there is. We're not going to all be allowed into Area 51 for obvious reasons. But Congressman Subramaniam, I'm always taken during this conversation by the question of where is the there? Our government cannot count votes in California in 2 weeks, and we're expected to believe that for 80 years, multiple generations, they have covered up what would be the greatest secret in human history? I just don't think the government's that good.
I don't know if the government's that good either. I'll say that there is a lot of information that these agencies have kept that a lot of people want to see. They want to see exactly what's there, and they want that form of transparency. And I say, let's give it to the people and let them make their own decision. I've seen some of it. I'll agree with Congressman McCormick that there's definitely some unexplainable stuff, but that doesn't mean there isn't an explanation, or that doesn't mean the explanation that it's little green men in a spaceship. So, I say release all the stuff and let people make their own decisions.
Okay, but Rich McCormick, there's two answers to that. One is there's things we can't release because maybe it's U.S. technology or maybe it's technology from other countries that we're surveilling. It hurts national security to release, which of course then everyone says you're covering everything up. Are we to believe that any secret the public has a right to demand under the name of transparency?
That's a really good point, actually. As a military guy, I will say there are technologies we're probably protecting that we have that maybe could explain some of these unidentified objects, as well as technologies of foreign countries and adversaries that we want to protect. I think the more concerning thing is, where are the scientists going? We do know that several leading scientists have disappeared. That's the one that I'm more curious about, because that's a factual debate.
Well, that is. I want to play for you real quickly David Grusch, who's been one of the big whistleblowers in this. Take a listen.
I certainly don't have the compendium. It's a continuum from corporeal, bipedal type life to, you know, what I would consider like sentient plasmoid life. But there are several that the U.S. government is aware of.
Do either of you have any idea what he is talking about?
Yeah, I've gotten that briefing from him directly, and basically what he's saying is there's different types of aliens that have been identified and we've made contact with. I'm a little skeptical. I think if you're going to make that kind of claim, you need some really hard proof, and I haven't, seen any hard proof yet. So, but that's certainly what he's saying.
I'm extremely skeptical.
Rich McCormick, we all are, trust me. What I'm skeptical about, though, is that this is all happening at exactly the same time there is this big movie from Steven Spielberg. I don't believe in coincidences in Washington.
No, I don't either, and I think this does coincide with a lot of drama, a lot of publicity. People love to have their claim to fame. But quite frankly, once again, even in the military, you've seen how people don't even keep secrets in top secret missions. We're making movies, and a year later, on things that we know we're not supposed to be talking about. I just don't see how they keep this a secret.
Yeah, well, maybe that's the point, that there isn't one, except in the movies, which Spielberg has always been able to bring to life. Gentlemen, thank you both. Reality check from both of you, Subramaniam, Rich McCormick.